The stars burned cold above the void, silent witnesses to the greatest gamble humanity had ever made. From the darkness drifted a single vessel, matte black and scarred from battle, the Black Ship. Its hull still carried the heat of re-entry and the ghosts of countless wars, but inside it pulsed with life, with hope, and with the quiet fury of a species that refused to die. It wasn't just a warship anymore. It was a symbol, the last spark of human defiance, carrying the weight of every colony that had fallen, every city reduced to dust, and every voice that had gone silent in the long war against the overmind. The crew was small, barely 50 souls, but each one had survived the impossible. Their ship had been written off a dozen times, their species declared extinct twice over. Yet here they were, drifting beyond the edge of the Orion Rift, staring into the vastness that had once belonged to gods and empires older than Earth itself. The captain stood at the viewing deck, eyes locked on a cluster of dying stars that shimmered faintly in the dark. They called it the Ash Halo, a place where even light seemed afraid to linger. Somewhere in there, hidden among the ruins of dead civilizations, was what humanity had been searching for, a weapon, a relic, or maybe just a truth powerful enough to turn the tide. The war had dragged on for generations. The Overmind's fleets had scoured the Milky Way, absorbing every race that dared to resist. They didn't conquer through hate or greed. They did it through logic, through cold perfection. To them, humans were a chaotic flaw, a species that thrived on emotion and unpredictability. But that chaos was also their greatest strength. When every strategy failed, when every system fell, humans adapted. They learned, rebuilt, and came back fiercer. The Black Ship was proof of that. Built from scavenged alien tech, powered by a hybrid drive no one fully understood, and guided by something even more mysterious: human instinct. The captain turned to the crew assembled behind him. Their faces were pale under the dim blue light, tired but unbroken. "This is it," he said quietly, his voice steady. "If the coordinates are right, we're standing at the edge of everything." A young engineer, her uniform smeared with grease and ash, looked up from her console. "You really think it's here? After all these years?" He nodded. "If the ancients built anything powerful enough to challenge the Overmind, this is where they hit it. The signals point here, same as before, but we only get one shot." The silence that followed was heavy. The crew had heard the same rumors whispered across broken channels and dying worlds, that deep within the Ash Halo, beyond the wreckage of forgotten empires, there was a forge. Not a weapon in the usual sense, but something that could reshape entire realities. No one knew how it worked, or even if it truly existed. But if it did, humanity might finally have a way to fight back. Not just survive, but win. Outside, the stars shifted as the ship's engines flared. The Black Ship slipped between shattered moons and drifting bones of ancient stations, each one a reminder of how many had fallen before them. They passed ruins that floated like tombstones, inscriptions in dead languages etched into metal and stone. Every time a sensor flickered, every time the hull groaned, hearts tensed. They were deep in enemy territory now, far beyond any safe route. "Reading something," the engineer murmured. Her hands danced across the console. Low-frequency pulse, not Overmind tech. It's old, really old. The captain stepped closer. "Lock on. Trace it." A faint vibration passed through the deck. The ship's lights dimmed as the pulse grew stronger. It was rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. For a moment, it felt as though the entire void was alive, watching them. Then the comms crackled. "Incoming transmission," said another voice from the bridge. "It's in an unknown dialect, but it sounds human." Every head turned. That was impossible. Humanity had no colonies this far out. None had survived. The captain's expression hardened. Patch it through. Static filled the room, followed by a distorted voice, distant and echoing. The words were broken, fragments of something ancient, yet familiar. Flame. Reborn. Guardians of the Forge. Humanity endures. The signal faded as quickly as it came. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. What was that? The engineer whispered. The captain stared out into the dark, his reflection faint against the glass. A warning, he said softly, or a welcome. The pulse grew stronger now, drawing them toward a point of light deep inside the ash halo. The black ship's systems flickered as gravitational waves twisted around them. Space itself began to bend. For a second, the stars seemed to breathe, collapsing inward, then stretching outward again. It was beautiful and terrifying all at once. They emerged into an open void where no light should have existed. In the distance, a structure floated, vast and silent, glowing faintly with orange fire. It looked like a colossal anvil forged from starlight, surrounded by rings of molten debris. The forge of the ancients. Humanity had found it. As the ship approached, the captain felt something stir in the back of his mind. A whisper, like an echo of memory. The voice wasn't words exactly, but it carried meaning. The flame endures only if it's shared. The ship's sensors screamed as energy readings spiked. The forge was waking up. The overmind must have detected it too, because suddenly alarms flared. Multiple warp signatures appeared on the radar, enemy ships closing fast. The crew sprang into action. Engines roared, shields flared, and the ship trembled under the sudden pressure of battle. The Overmind's fleet emerged from the shadows, their ships sleek and silver, each one carrying enough firepower to level a planet. The captain knew they couldn't fight them head-on. Not here, not now. "Divert all power to the Forge interface," he ordered. "If we can activate it, maybe we can use it before they destroy us." The engineer hesitated. "Sir, we don't even know what it does." "Neither did the people who built it," he said. "But they left it for someone who would." The deck shuddered as the first barrage struck. Sparks flew. Fire broke out near the aft section. But still, the black ship held course. Every crew member knew what was at stake. This was more than a mission. This was the last stand of their kind. As the forge's light engulfed them, time seemed to slow. The captain's hand hovered over the final command key. Outside, enemy ships swarmed closer, their weapons locking on. The black ship's hull began to tear, pieces drifting away into the void. "Now," he whispered. A surge of brilliance flooded the bridge. For a single, blinding moment, everything vanished. The stars, the ships, even the sound of war. All that remained was light, pure and endless. When vision returned, the captain saw something impossible. The black ship wasn't destroyed. It was changed. The hull burned with living fire, and the forge's energy pulsed through every circuit, every soul aboard. Humanity had awakened something greater than a weapon. The captain smiled faintly, the fire reflecting in his eyes. "Let's show them what it means to be human." The Overmind fleet advanced, and the screen cut to black. The light faded slowly, leaving behind a deep hum that filled every corridor of the black ship. The crew stood frozen, their eyes wide as they looked around, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The flames that had consumed the ship moments before were gone, replaced by a faint glow that pulsed along the metal walls, like veins carrying life through a body. Systems that had been destroyed moments earlier flickered back online. The engines, once damaged beyond repair, now hummed with energy that none of them recognized. It wasn't electricity, it was something else, something alive. The captain's voice cut through the stunned silence. "Status report." The engineer tapped furiously at her console, her hands shaking. "Engine stable, but the power source is reading off the charts. Sir, this isn't any kind of fusion or plasma signature, it's..." New. Define new, he said quietly. She hesitated, biting her lip. Its reading as biological and mechanical at the same time, like the ship's evolving. A chill ran through the room. The black ship had always been different, rebuilt from alien scrap and human invention, but this was beyond anything they had seen. Every light on the bridge seemed to pulse in rhythm with their breathing. The air itself felt charged, heavy with invisible energy. Somewhere deep in the hull, they could hear the slow, steady beat of the forge's power. The captain turned to the main viewport. The enemy ships were still out there, suspended at a distance, as if unsure what to do next. The Overmind never hesitated, never stalled. Their fleets moved with perfect coordination, flawless in their logic. But now, for the first time, they were waiting. Watching. "What are they doing?" someone whispered. The captain didn't answer. He watched the distant ships, their sleek silver forms glinting against the dim light of the forge. Something told him they were scanning the area, trying to understand what had changed, and maybe, for the first time, they didn't have an answer. He looked around at his crew, the last survivors of a dying civilization, now bound to a ship that had somehow become part of them. They had no idea what the forge had done, only that it had changed everything. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," he said. "If they decide to attack, I want to be ready." The pilot, an older man with scars running down his neck, gave a grim nod. "Aye, sir. But if this new power's real, we might finally have a fighting chance." The captain didn't respond. A chance, yes, but at what cost? The forge had chosen them. But why? Humanity had stumbled across it by desperation, not destiny. Yet it had responded as if it had been waiting. As the ship drifted silently near the glowing structure, the captain's thoughts wandered to the beginning of it all, to the time before the war. Back when Earth still had oceans and cities still touched the sky. The Overmind had appeared without warning, descending through the stars like judgment itself. At first, humanity had tried diplomacy, then defense, and finally defiance. Every fleet that rose was destroyed. Every fortress burned. The last survivors fled into deep space, forming ragtag colonies that barely held together. The black ship had been born in that chaos. It was never meant to exist, a desperate project pieced together from what remained of humanity's brilliance and desperation. A handful of engineers, soldiers, and scientists had combined human creativity with alien relics scavenged from the ruins of lost species. It was dangerous, unpredictable, and unlike any other vessel, but it had survived when no others did. Now, years later, it was carrying something that could change everything. "Captain," the engineer said again, pulling him from his thoughts, "I think the forge linked to our neural systems. The ship's reading our biosignatures and adapting in real time." He frowned. "You mean it's alive?" "Not exactly. More like it's learning from us, our thoughts, our instincts. It's responding to human input directly." A murmur ran through the crew. The idea of a machine thinking with them, and maybe for them, was both thrilling and terrifying. Suddenly the lights dimmed again and the hum deepened. The captain's vision blurred for a moment, and he saw something impossible. A memory that wasn't his. A vast chamber filled with fire, shadowy figures working around a glowing core. A voice, deep and resonant, echoed in his mind. "The forge does not choose by blood but by will." He blinked, gasping for air. The vision was gone. Only the bridge remained. The engineer stared at him, her face pale. "Sir, did you see that?" He nodded slowly. Yes. They weren't alone in their minds anymore. The forge's presence lingered, like a quiet heartbeat just beneath the surface of thought. It wasn't hostile. It was curious. Watching. Listening. Before anyone could speak again, alarms blared. The Overmind ships were moving, their formation tightened, their weapons flaring to life. The black ship's sensors spiked with incoming energy signatures. The moment of hesitation was over. "Brace for impact!" the captain shouted. The first wave hit like thunder. The black ship trembled, the sound of plasma fire echoing through the hull. But instead of tearing apart, the energy seemed to dissolve against an invisible field. The engineer looked at her console in disbelief. "It's absorbing the hits. The forge is redirecting the energy into our systems." The captain stared at the display as power levels surged. "Then let's give it something to do with that energy." The ship's weapons came online, glowing with the same orange light that filled the forge. When they fired, it wasn't a blast of plasma. It was a beam of living fire, arcing through the void with impossible precision. The nearest overmined cruiser shattered instantly, its hull melting into vapor. The explosion lit the darkness like dawn. Cheers erupted across the bridge, but the captain didn't smile. The overmined ships were regrouping, adapting to the new threat. He knew this wouldn't end here. For every ship they destroyed, 10 more would come. "Set a course away from the forge," he ordered. "We need distance before they bring reinforcements." "But sir, what about the forge itself?" the engineer asked. "If they capture it." "They won't," he said firmly. "It's awake now. It won't let them." As the ship accelerated, the forge's glow began to dim, as if sinking back into slumber. The overmined fleet moved in around it, encircling the massive structure. But even as they closed in, the forge's fire pulsed once more and vanished. The entire structure folded in on itself, disappearing into a single point of light that blinked out, leaving nothing behind. The crew sat in stunned silence. The forge was gone, as if it had never been there. "Where did it go?" someone whispered. The captain stared at the spot where it had been. "I don't think it left," he said quietly. "I think it moved." The black ship raced through the stars, its hull gleaming faintly with living fire. The crew worked in tense silence, each lost in their own thoughts. They had survived the impossible once again, but what had they become in the process? The ship wasn't just a vessel anymore. It was evolving, growing stronger, more aware. As they drifted toward the edge of known space, a strange pattern began to appear in their sensor readings, signals repeating at precise intervals, hidden in the background radiation. It wasn't overmind code. It was human. The engineer leaned forward, decoding the transmission. Her face went pale. "Sir, this is coming from deep space, from beyond the galactic rim." The captain's pulse quickened. "Another colony?" She shook her head. "No, it's older. Much older. The message is simple. It says, 'We lit the first flame. Now it's your turn.'" The captain stared out at the endless night. The black ship's flame flickered in the void, the only light in a universe that seemed determined to smother it. Somewhere out there, others had walked this path before. Maybe they had failed. Maybe they had become something more. He didn't know yet. But one thing was certain. The war for humanity's survival had only just begun. And this time, the fire burned brighter than ever. The black ship drifted through the void like a shadow carried by firelight. The glow along its hull had dimmed, pulsing softly as if the ship itself were catching its breath. The forge's power still burned within it, but the crew could feel its weight, a quiet, unseen pressure that settled into their minds. Every system hummed differently now, as if it were listening. Even the air felt alive. Days passed, though no one aboard could really tell. The stars here were strange, cold and distant, some flickering unnaturally as if space itself were unstable. The crew tried to rest, but sleep offered little comfort. Some swore they heard whispers in the dark, soft voices that came through the comms when no one was transmitting. Others said they dreamed of fire and endless cities built from light. The captain kept his thoughts to himself. He spent hours on the viewing deck, watching the stars and the strange signals that came through the sensors. Ever since the forge had merged with their ship, the data readings made less sense each day. The energy signature that had saved them now appeared everywhere, woven through the background radiation of space. It was like the forge had left its fingerprints across reality itself. The engineer barely left the engine bay. She was obsessed with the readings, running endless tests, tracing the pulse of the forge's power through the ship's systems. "It's rewriting us," she told the captain one night. "Not just the ship, us. Our biomonitors show changes in our neural patterns, small but spreading." He frowned. "Are you saying it's controlling us?" "No," she said after a pause. "It's syncing with us, learning from us, maybe even protecting us. But if it keeps going, I don't know where it stops. We might become something else entirely." Her words lingered long after she left. The captain stared at the faint glow along the walls, wondering if humanity could truly survive what it was becoming. Far below deck, in the lower compartments where light barely reached, 2 crew members were whispering. One of them, a communications officer, had intercepted strange data packets hidden inside the forge's pulse. They weren't just energy signatures. They were messages, images, memories, fragments of something ancient. "I don't think the forge was built by humans," he said quietly. His companion frowned. "Then who did?" He hesitated before answering. "I think it was built by something that was human, or became human again after everything else was gone." The words made no sense, but the tone in his voice left no doubt that he believed them. Back on the bridge, the crew picked up a faint signal, a transmission echoing from a system several light years away. The voice that came through was distorted but unmistakably human. "This is Outpost Meridian. To any survivors, if you can hear this, we're under siege. The Overmind found us. We need help." The crew exchanged stunned looks. Outpost Meridian was supposed to have been destroyed years ago, wiped out during the second wave of the invasion. Yet the signal was real. The captain didn't hesitate. "Plot a course," he ordered. As the black ship accelerated toward the coordinates, the tension among the crew grew heavier. They were heading straight back into Overmind territory, into the kind of fight that had ended every other human fleet before them. But this time was different. They had the forge. And though no one said it aloud, part of them wanted to see what it could really do. When they dropped out of warp, the stars twisted around them. Before them hung a dying planet, charred, broken, and wrapped in smoke. Massive Overmind vessels circled in low orbit, their movements cold and precise. And beneath the clouds, the surface burned with signs of battle. "Meridian's defense grid is still active," the engineer said. "Barely holding, but it's there." The captain's jaw tightened. "We're going in!" The black ship dove through the upper atmosphere, fire streaking across its hull. The crew's hearts pounded as the ship's systems synced with their thoughts, responding faster than any command could. Enemy ships moved in, firing plasma rounds that split the sky. The forge absorbed the impacts again, each shot making the hull glow brighter. "Target the lead cruiser!" the captain shouted. The ship's forward cannons roared, unleashing a torrent of flame that tore through the enemy formation. One ship exploded instantly. 2 more drifted, crippled. But for every one they destroyed, more arrived. The Overmind fleet closed in like a silver storm. The captain watched the chaos unfold, his mind racing. "They're adapting again. They always do." The engineer gritted her teeth. "Then we adapt faster." Deep inside the ship, the forge pulsed like a heartbeat. Systems shifted on their own, rerouting power through unknown channels. For a split second, every screen on the bridge flashed with a strange symbol, an ancient mark glowing in fire. The crew didn't recognize it, but it felt familiar, like something buried deep in memory. Then, without warning, the ship split into 2 mirrored projections. To the Overmind sensors, there were suddenly 2 black ships, both moving at impossible speeds. The enemy fired wildly, unable to track which was real. The crew gasped as the real ship wove through the crossfire, slipping between enemy blasts like smoke. "What was that?" someone cried. The engineer stared at her readouts. A reflection field. The forge projected an echo of us, an illusion made of light and plasma. It was beautiful and terrifying. The Overmind's logical precision was failing against something it couldn't predict. Humanity had turned chaos into a weapon. But as the battle raged, the cost became clear. The forge's power was consuming vast amounts of energy, draining systems faster than they could recover. The hull began to vibrate, the lights flickering. The crew could feel the ship straining to hold itself together. "Captain, we can't sustain this much longer," the engineer shouted. He clenched his fists. "We're not leaving until Meridian's clear." Below, on the planet's surface, the last human defenders watched in awe as the black ship burned through the sky like a second sun. The transmission from the outpost came through again, faint but filled with emotion. "Whoever you are up there, thank you." The captain didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the Overmind's command vessel, a massive structure shaped like a blade hovering above the ruins. It radiated power, and he knew instinctively that this was the real enemy, the core of the invasion. Before he could give the order to strike, a blinding surge of energy burst from the command ship. The entire planet shook. The black ship was thrown off course, alarms screaming. The forge's pulse flickered violently. "Sir!" the engineer cried. "They've deployed something, an energy field unlike anything I've ever seen. It's disrupting the forge." The captain fought to steady himself. "Can we counter it?" "I don't know. Whatever it is, it's like they've learned how to silence it." The crew struggled as the ship's systems began to fail. The fire that had once shielded them dimmed, replaced by darkness. The captain could feel the forge fighting back, trying to resist the pull of the Overmind's weapon. The air grew colder. For the first time, the ship felt afraid. In the static of the dying systems, a faint voice whispered, not through the speakers, but in their minds, "The flame must not fade." The captain looked at his crew, each one staring back with the same fear and determination. "Hold together," he said. "We've come too far to fall now." Outside, the Overmind fleet closed in, their ships forming a ring of cold light around the wounded black ship. The human defenders on the surface watched helplessly as their last hope was surrounded. But deep within the ship, the forge stirred again, its pulse faint but growing. The walls glowed softly, and the crew felt something awaken, not just in the ship, but in themselves. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were becoming part of something larger, something older than the war itself. The captain stared into the growing light. "If the forge learns from us," he said quietly, "then let it learn what it means to fight." Outside, the Overmind's energy field tightened, and space itself began to distort. The battle for Meridian wasn't over, but the fire that had started in the heart of the black ship was far from done burning. And somewhere, beyond sight, the forge listened, waiting for humanity to decide what it would become. The ship trembled as the Overmind's energy field closed in, wrapping around the black ship like an invisible fist. The hull groaned, the lights flickered, and the air grew heavy with static. Every heartbeat felt louder than the engines. On the bridge, the crew worked in near silence, hands shaking as they tried to keep systems alive. The hum of the forge, once steady and warm, now pulsed unevenly, like a fading heartbeat. The captain stood at the center, staring into the darkness beyond the viewport where the enemy fleet waited, thousands of ships, motionless and cold, orbiting the dying planet like a steel storm. "Shields are collapsing," the engineer said through gritted teeth. "That energy field is cutting through everything we've got." The captain's voice was calm, but his eyes were sharp. "How much time?" "Minutes, maybe less." Outside, space rippled like liquid. A dark shape emerged from the distortion, a ship, sleek and black, glowing faintly with crimson fire. It was almost identical to the black ship, down to the smallest detail. The bridge fell silent. The engineer whispered, "That's us." It wasn't just a copy. It was perfect. The same markings, the same hull design, even the same battle scars from their last fight. The only difference was the light that burned across its surface, a dark red version of the forge's fire. The communications console came alive with static. A voice came through, low and steady. "You shouldn't have come here." It was the captain's voice again, but colder, sharper, like it had been carved from steel. The real captain froze, his heart pounding. "This is the Black Ship," he said cautiously. "Identify yourself." The voice on the other end chuckled softly. "You already know. We're what you left behind when you burned the sky." The crew looked to their captain for answers, but he had none. The other ship's lights flickered, and for a brief moment it split into several shadowy outlines before merging back again. Whatever it wasn't bound by the same rules of space or time. The engineer stared at her screens. "Sir, the other ship's forge is resonating with ours. They're linked somehow." The captain took a deep breath. "Then it's not a copy. It's us, from another timeline." The revelation sent a wave of unease across the room. The forge hadn't just saved them, it had fractured reality. Somewhere, in another version of the war, the Black Ship had made different choices. And now that version had found them. The other captain's voice returned, this time filled with quiet fury. "You think you can still save them? You think the forge is your ally? It's not. It learns, it adapts, but it doesn't serve. You feed it. It feeds back. Until there's nothing left of you to give." The real captain clenched his fists. "You're wrong. We control it." The echo laughed softly. "That's what I said once." Without warning, the crimson Black Ship fired. A lance of dark light tore through the void, grazing their hull. The impact rattled the deck, throwing the crew off balance. "Return fire!" the captain shouted. The forge responded instantly, its golden flame flaring to life. The two ships danced through the darkness, exchanging bolts of living fire that tore through space itself. The stars around them twisted and shattered as reality bent under the strain. The engineer's voice was frantic. "The forge's energy is unstable. Every shot is destabilizing this entire sector. We could collapse the whole region into a singularity." "Then end this quickly," the captain snapped. But the other ship was faster, anticipating every move. It knew their tactics, their instincts. It was like fighting a mirror that learned every thought before it was made. Then the enemy's voice returned, calm and cruel. "You still don't understand, do you? The forge doesn't want peace. It wants creation, destruction, rebirth. It chose us because we burn brightest when we're desperate." The captain gritted his teeth. "Then what are you?" "Proof," the voice said. "Proof that humanity can't escape itself." The red-black ship's engines flared, and suddenly it vanished, folding space around itself and reappearing directly behind them. The crew barely had time to react as another wave of dark fire tore across their shields. Systems dimmed, alarms screamed, and the bridge filled with smoke. "Shields failing!" The captain steadied himself, his mind racing. The other ship wasn't just attacking, it was pushing them, driving them somewhere. He glanced at the sensors and saw it. A swirling distortion ahead, the same signature as the forge's heart. "It's forcing us toward another forge," the engineer said, her voice trembling. "It's like it wants us to merge." The captain's pulse quickened. "If that happens, then both realities could collapse." The crew exchanged terrified glances. The hum of the forge grew louder, almost frantic, like it was fighting to resist being pulled in. But the enemy's red forge pulsed stronger, dragging them closer with every passing second. "Cut engines," the captain ordered. "Divert all power to counter-thrust." The ship strained, groaning under the pressure. The stars outside bent and twisted, colors bleeding together. The voice from the enemy ship came one last time. Quieter now. "You can't fight it, we tried. The forge always wins." Then the transmission cut off, replaced by the sound of static and something else beneath it. A heartbeat. The captain looked out into the glowing distortion ahead, where two fires, one gold, one red, were beginning to merge. The light grew brighter, twisting, folding space around them. For a moment, he thought he saw faces in the flames, thousands of them, human and not, reaching out as if trying to warn him. "Sir," the engineer said softly, "we're out of time." The captain gripped the rail, eyes locked on the growing storm ahead. "Then we burn brighter." The two ships collided in a storm of fire and light. The forge screamed, not in words, but in a sound that echoed through every living mind in range. The universe around them shuddered, and the stars themselves began to unravel. The screen filled with light again. And this time even the fire went silent. For a heartbeat, everything stopped. There was no sound, no motion, only a blinding brilliance that stretched beyond understanding. It was as if existence itself had been peeled open, exposing the raw pulse of creation underneath. The two black ships, one burning gold, the other red, hung suspended in the storm of fractured time. Their flames intertwined, fighting for dominance, their energy waves tearing through the void. Inside the bridge, the crew felt the vibration in their bones. Panels flickered, metal groaned, and the hum of the forge grew into a scream that filled every corner of their minds. The captain stood at the center of it all, watching the golden light of their forge struggle against the crimson blaze of the other. The two forces twisted together like living serpents, locked in an endless loop of creation and destruction. The engineer gripped the console, her knuckles white. "The fusion's unstable. If this continues, both ships will be erased, along with everything around us." "Options?" the captain demanded. She hesitated. "We could isolate the forge core, force it to collapse inward. It might stop the feedback loop, but it'll destroy the ship." The captain took a long breath. Around him, his crew waited in silence. Every one of them knew what that meant. Their mission had always been about sacrifice. The black ship existed to be humanity's final shield, the weapon of last resort. And now it had come to that moment. He turned to the engineer. "Do it." She looked at him, fear flickering in her eyes. "Sir, that would—" "Humanity survived because we refused to surrender," he interrupted, his voice calm. "We'll end this our way." The forge pulsed again, louder now, almost defiant. But beneath the roar, he could feel something else. Something conscious. The forge wasn't just reacting, it was listening. The captain closed his eyes and reached for the control link. For a moment, the bridge vanished. He was inside the forge again, surrounded by rivers of golden fire, each current humming with energy and memory. Then he saw it, the reflection. The red forge, coiling around his like a shadow, whispering in a voice that was his own. "You can't destroy me," it said softly. "You made me." He stared into the crimson flame. "You're not me." The shadow smiled. "You are every choice you made, and every one you didn't. I'm what happens when the fire consumes instead of protects. You think you're the savior, but you're just another part of the cycle." The captain felt the forge tremble around him. The golden light dimmed slightly, as if unsure. The red flame's voice grew stronger. "End it now," it urged. "Let it all burn, and something better will rise." He hesitated. The temptation was real, an end to the pain, to the endless wars, to humanity's struggle against its own mistakes. But then he remembered their mission, the promise they made before the first jump, when Earth was still a memory and hope was all they had left. He took a step forward. "No," he said quietly. "You're wrong. The fire doesn't define us. We define it." With that, he reached into the heart of the forge and pulled. The pain was beyond anything physical. It was like tearing a piece of his soul free. The golden and red flames convulsed, twisting around each other in violent motion. The ship shuddered, alarms screaming, lights dying. On the bridge, the crew held on as the walls began to distort. The stars outside flickered like dying embers. Time itself seemed to slow, stretch, then splinter. The engineer shouted over the chaos, "He's doing it! The forge is collapsing!" But then something unexpected happened. Instead of fading, the golden flame began to split, forming a new thread of light between the two conflicting fires. It wasn't gold or red, but white, pure and blinding. The energy flowed outward, steady and calm, pushing against both extremes. In the vision space of the forge, the captain stood before the two fires, the golden flame on one side, the red on the other, and now this new light between them. It pulsed softly, almost like a heartbeat. The shadow version of himself looked at it with confusion. "What is that?" The captain smiled faintly. "Balance." He reached toward the white flame, feeling warmth flood through him. It wasn't just power, it was clarity. He saw every version of himself across every possible reality, the ones who won, the ones who failed, the ones who burned the stars, and the ones who refused. They were all pieces of the same whole. Humanity wasn't defined by its destruction, but by its ability to rise again, each time different, stronger, more aware. The captain opened his eyes back on the bridge. The entire ship was bathed in white light. The storm outside was breaking apart, space knitting itself back together. The red-black ship across from them was dissolving, its hull melting into energy that drifted like ash on the wind. The enemy's voice echoed one last time, faint and distant. "You can't change what's coming?" The captain whispered back. "Maybe not. But we can change how we face it." The white forge flared one final time, and then everything went silent. When the crew awoke, they were weightless. The ship was drifting quietly through space, the stars calm and steady again. The screens flickered back to life. Readings returned to normal. The distortion, the storm, the red flame, all gone. The engineer looked around in disbelief. "It's over." The captain stared out at the stars. "No," he said softly. "It's beginning." She frowned. "What do you mean?" He pointed toward the forward display. There, just ahead of them, was a planet. Blue oceans, green land, white clouds, a world that looked impossibly familiar. Earth, but it wasn't the Earth they left behind. The continents were shaped differently, the atmosphere cleaner, untouched by centuries of war and ruin. It was as if they had stepped into a future, or perhaps a rebirth of the past. The crew stared in silence, the realization washing over them. The forge hadn't destroyed reality. It had rewritten it. Then the twist revealed itself. The ship's sensors began to detect signals from the planet below, human transmissions, but they weren't the old frequencies. They were advanced, organized, belonging to a civilization that had evolved far beyond their own. The captain felt a chill. "Run a scan." The engineer did, her hands shaking. "Sir, the life signatures, they're human, but not from our timeline." The captain leaned closer to the viewport. Down below, he could see lights, cities glittering across the planet's surface, shaped in precise patterns that seemed almost deliberate. The forge pulsed softly behind them, as if watching. Then a voice came through the comms, clear, calm, and undeniably human. "Black ship, this is Earth Command. You've been gone a long time." The crew froze. The captain's breath caught in his chest. The signal carried an echo, a tone that sounded eerily familiar, his own voice but older, steadier. He looked around the bridge, eyes meeting those of his crew. No one spoke. The voice continued, "We've been waiting for you. The fire you left behind kept us alive. Now it's your turn to learn what became of it." The transmission ended, leaving only the soft hum of the forge. The captain stared at the planet below, his reflection shimmering faintly in the glass. For the first time, the forge didn't feel like a weapon. It felt alive, almost expectant. He whispered, What did we really create? No one answered. The stars around them gleamed brighter, as if waiting for the next spark to fall. And somewhere deep within the forge's heart, the white flame flickered, steady, watchful, eternal. The balance had been found, but its meaning was only beginning to unfold. The bridge was quiet. The only sound was the faint hum of the forge. Calm now, its light soft and steady like a heartbeat at rest. The crew stood in silence, watching the blue and green world below. None of them spoke for a long time, as if afraid that words might shatter the fragile peace hanging in the air. After everything, the war, the sacrifice, the flames that nearly tore reality apart, it was hard to believe this was real. The captain looked out at the planet that looked so much like home. "Prepare a landing team," he said softly. His voice didn't carry the weight it once had. It was steadier, lighter, almost human again. The engineer nodded, her eyes still wide with disbelief. "Do you think they're really us?" "I don't know," he said, "but we'll find out." As the black ship descended through the planet's atmosphere, clouds rolled around them, golden sunlight spilling across the hull. The forge's glow dimmed as though bowing in respect to the world below. When they broke through the mist, they saw a landscape that felt both ancient and new. There were forests stretching for miles, oceans that shimmered like glass, and cities of light rising gently from the land. The cities didn't look built for war. They were open, filled with gardens and flowing towers. Humanity had rebuilt, not in defiance, but in harmony. When the ship landed on a vast plain outside one of the shining cities, a group of people was already waiting. They wore simple clothes of pale silver fabric, and their faces were calm. There was no fear in their eyes, only curiosity, as though they had expected this moment all along. A woman stepped forward, her gaze meeting the captain's. She looked human, but there was something timeless about her presence. "Welcome home," she said. The captain hesitated. "Home?" She smiled faintly. "You are the ones who set the flame in motion. The black ship's light became legend here. For thousands of years, we followed its echo. You didn't destroy the universe. You guided it to evolve." The words struck him deeper than any battle wound. Behind him, the crew exchanged stunned looks. The forge, the endless fights, the sacrifices, they had not been meaningless. The fire that had once been a weapon of survival had become something more. The woman gestured for them to follow. "Come. There's much you should see." They entered the city. The air was clean and warm, filled with the hum of quiet energy. Machines worked beside humans without noise or command, guided by thought alone. Children played beside glowing pools of water that responded to their touch. There was no sign of war, no walls or soldiers. It was a civilization that had grown past fear. The engineer whispered, "They did it. They really did it." The captain walked in silence, his eyes taking in every detail. He remembered the countless battles, the faces of those lost along the way, the worlds burned to ash. And now, here was what they had all fought for, a humanity reborn not through conquest, but understanding. As they reached the city's center, a tall spire rose into the sky, pulsing with a familiar light. The forge's energy. The woman turned to them. "The flame never died. It changed with us. It's part of every thought, every creation. You called it the forge. We call it the heart." The captain stepped closer, feeling the warmth of it wash over him. "You learned to live with it," he murmured. She nodded. "We learned that fire can destroy, but it can also give life. The key was never power. It was balance." The crew stood together, and for the first time since their journey began, they felt peace. The captain closed his eyes for a moment, hearing the faint echo of the old forge inside his mind. It didn't sound angry anymore. It was calm, quiet, content. But as he turned to leave, the woman spoke again. "There's one more thing you should know." Her tone was gentle, but something in it made him pause. "What is it?" She looked toward the sky. "The red flame you faced, it wasn't an enemy. It was part of the same cycle. Every act of creation casts a reflection. You brought the balance, but the echo remains. Somewhere beyond this reality, the cycle will start again. Different faces, different choices, but the same test." The captain's chest tightened. "Can it be stopped?" The woman shook her head. "Not stopped, only understood. The forge is not just a weapon, it's a reminder. Every time humanity reaches too far, it challenges us to decide what we're willing to become." He looked up at the horizon, the sun breaking through the clouds. "Then maybe that's enough. Maybe that's what it means to be human, to keep learning." She smiled softly. "That's why the fire chose you." The captain turned back to his crew. "We did our part. Let's rest." They spent several days among the people, learning, sharing stories, understanding how humanity had evolved. The city's archives showed them fragments of history, how survivors of old colonies found the forge's remnants and used its energy to rebuild, to create instead of destroy. Over generations, its power had become part of their very being, a bridge between thought and creation. At night, the captain stood outside, looking up at the stars. The sky was full of light again. No scars, no warships, only peace. He thought of the countless ships that had fallen before them, the people who had believed in a future they would never see. And he felt a quiet gratitude. The black ship had carried their hope farther than any of them imagined. The engineer joined him, her voice soft. "You think we'll ever see the others again?" He smiled faintly. "In some way, we already have. They're here, in all of this." She nodded, understanding. They stood in silence, watching the horizon glow with the rising sun. The next morning, the black ship prepared to leave. The people of the new earth gathered to watch, their faces glowing in the sunlight. The woman from before placed her hand on the hull. "Wherever you go," she said, "the flame will guide you. You carry more than history. You carry the memory of choice." The captain bowed his head. "We'll remember." As the engines came to life, the forge's white light filled the bridge once more. The captain looked at his crew, tired, scarred, but smiling. They had come full circle. Humanity had endured, not through domination, but through transformation. The ship lifted into the sky, cutting through clouds like a silent arrow. The city below grew smaller until it disappeared beneath the horizon. And then, just before they left the atmosphere, the forge pulsed once, brighter than ever. A single message flashed across the captain's console, written in simple light. "Balance kept, fire eternal." He smiled, resting his hand on the console. "Let's go see what's next." The stars opened up before them, vast and endless. The black ship's engines hummed gently, its flame glowing calm and steady. There was no fear now, no war waiting beyond the dark, only the infinite unknown and the quiet promise of life continuing. As they vanished into the distance, the white flame shimmered behind them, leaving a faint trail of light across the stars. And somewhere, in the heart of the universe, the forge pulsed again. Alive, aware, waiting for the next story to begin. Humanity's fire had not ended. It had simply evolved.